The Red River Farm Network is celebrating women in agriculture. It is our series called Agricult-HER. I'm Don Wick from the Red River Farm Network, and first of all, thanks to our sponsor, our title sponsor, the Minnesota Soybean Research and Promotion Council, but a lot of great support from Ag Country Farm Credit Services, North Dakota Corn Council, Minnesota Corn Growers Association, Amity Technologies. And today, a pleasure to be visiting with Whitney Place, the State Executive Director of the Minnesota Farm Service Agency. Whitney, thanks a ton for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Well, you started in Okabena, Minnesota, down in southwest Minnesota. Tell us a little bit about your start in this business.
Sure. Yes, I did. I grew up in farming families. So on both my dad's side and my mom's side, we have family farms. Technically, we lived in town, but my dad has farmed, my grandmother's farm for a number of years now. And so in Okabena, everybody's basically a farmer tied to agriculture in some way. So that's just kind of the culture of the town and the people that I grew up with. But I, of course, was going to get out and not be involved in agriculture at all. And through FFA, through some of the opportunities that I had in high school, I moved into CFANS at the University of Minnesota, got my agronomy and plant genetics degree, and I really wanted to be a plant breeder. The Norman Borlaug culture is strong at the U of M. And I had the opportunity to work in a lab while I was in college, and I was like, man, plant breeding is really slow, and it is just not for me. So kind of shifted more into this public policy space. I was really interested in some of the coursework that I was taking that was more issues-based. We had some really fantastic professors. One professor biked across Africa and talked about the agriculture he was seeing with us. One of my first virtual class opportunities, which now in 2024 seems very historic. But I was driven a little bit more about those issues conversations that we were having in agriculture. So decided to shift into that work. Headed out to the National Farmers Union. They were gracious enough to take me on as an intern. Decided this is what I want to do with my life. Went to the Humphrey School of Public Policy, got my environmental policy master's, and landed at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. So that's kind of the full journey.
So we go way back, obviously. I know your dad really well, a longtime FFA advisor. Keith's a bit of a policy wonk, I think, as well. How did Dad influence you in this whole process?
Well, it is funny. I do credit him a little bit. I remember being in, I don't know which agriculture class it was, probably Ag 9, when he wrote the letters CRP up on the whiteboard. And just kind of that concept of paying farmers for an environmental service that they are providing to the public was really intriguing to me, and now we've totally come full circle, now that I get to oversee the CRP program in Minnesota. So he certainly was influential. I appreciate everyone in Minnesota Ag for dealing with my dad's hot takes on ag policy.
Oh, he's the best. Who are maybe some of your other mentors along the way?
Well, I don't think that you get to be in a position like mine as a woman without recognizing and getting to watch and learn from a lot of women in leadership. And I think that especially in Minnesota agriculture, and perhaps you've interviewed some of these amazing women, I've just gotten lucky to be in rooms with lots of different women. And I think that at the University of Minnesota, certainly we have Bev Durgan as the Dean of Extension. She was coming into my classes as a college student. She's a weed scientist by training, and so she was a professor. I feel like women like Bev and in our sector have been sitting in rooms where she was the only woman for many years, long before I came on the scene. I have a great friend and mentor in Deputy Commissioner Andrea Vauble at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. She really paved the way for me at the MDA to take on some of the roles that I got to do. And most of the time I'm always like, what would Andrea do in this situation? She's been invaluable in her guidance and friendship. But also, I have a lot of men mentors who propped me up. I certainly would not be in any of these positions without Commissioner Dave Frederickson taking a chance on me at MDA. And Commissioner Peterson kept me on, with a change in administration. And so it's been really great getting to work with kind of a wide variety of people, wide variety of leadership styles, and to get to be in some of those rooms to see what the decision making's like. And so I have many mentors, and I'm
cool.
lucky in that
Very,
role.
very cool. You spent close to a dozen years with MDA, with the State Ag Department, including time as Assistant Commissioner, and now with FSA during the Biden administration years here. Tell me, what are some of those memories you've had? What kind of sticks out as some of the highlights during those times in really these high-profile jobs?
Yeah. Well, first of all, a highlight that I think anyone who's worked in government gets to experience a lot is just how dedicated our public servants are. They could be making money elsewhere. They could be doing a lot of different things. Specifically at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, I would put our staff up against, any organization in the state, in the country. We had the opportunity to do some really innovative things, and a lot of that came from the really good work of staff in our program areas, coming up with ideas, bringing them to the commissioner's office. One big highlight for me, and it's a little bit personal because my family has also been unfortunately touched by farmer suicide, but the whole conversation around mental health really spurred kind of in 2018 when dairy farms were being lost at unprecedented rates across Minnesota, and really just spurring that conversation. And that conversation continues to be led by women in the state. We have Ted Matthews, who's a fabulous advocate for mental health, but I think the conversation was reinvigorated and really pushed through the legislature by folks like Meg Moynihan. The chair of the Ag Committee at the time was Jean Poppy, and so those investments and that kind of conversation and really putting Minnesota as a leader on the map in that space was led by women. I think another highlight was getting to do innovative things like the dairy program, and I'm not going to be able to remember the acronym, DAIRI, which was an incentive payment for farmers to sign up for the federal dairy margin coverage program. We were the only state doing something like that. It was an investment in dairy farmers at a time when they needed it. And I think it got folks in a program that has been pretty successful, and so we still see the outcomes of that. There are so many other issue areas, but I think that those two highlight kind of the public servants in the Department of Ag bringing forward ideas and issues, and then us, getting them through the legislature and seeing them through.
You live in a world of acronyms. You mentioned CRP, and we've got ARZ, PLC. The list goes on. Tell me something about your job that maybe the average person wouldn't know.
Well, acronyms are a very good one. My first day at FSA, someone emailed me a 17-page PDF that is just a list of all the acronyms. And I still have to DM, my staff, wait a sec, what does that mean during meetings? But you're a true FSA employee when you start using the acronyms as nouns, and so that's a win. I think, people know this, but I don't think that until you're in the system, you can appreciate the sheer volume of work, applications, funding, assistance that we put out every year at Minnesota FSA. at the end of our fiscal year, which ends September 30th, I put out like an annual accomplishments email just to the staff, just so they can see, all of the work that they've done. And, when you're saying it in millions and hundreds of millions of dollars, I think it's hard to grasp. But I think when you're in the agency, you can see day to day the impact that has on individual farmers and just the sheer amount of work that our staff do on a regular basis.
Yeah, the workload has only gotten more intense, I think, in recent years as well.
Yeah. With all the ad hoc programs,
Right.
we're always kept on our toes for sure.
So, what kind of opportunities do you see for women in government in places like FSA?
Well, in FSA, women really dominate our workforce in Minnesota. Our workforce is 80% women.
Really?
Yes. And, I do want to add that we are serving a customer base that is predominantly men. And I don't want this podcast to get, too negative, but there are certain challenges that come with that. And so, men, be respectful of the women at your FSA office. There have been some incidents and stories that I am not proud of, and, our women at FSA who are serving you should not have to put up with any crap. But that being said, one of the deficiencies I think we saw in FSA was the ability for people to be mobile within the agency. Something that was set up was a training program to get into managerial roles. And that training program required folks to train across the state for a full year, which is a challenging endeavor for anyone. And then you would be placed kind of wherever we had an opening. So, we had people whose hometown was Wabasha who were being placed in Roseau. That's not very conducive to anyone's life, but particularly women who are, societally more tied geography-wise to a place. I think that was a barrier for women to rise in leadership. And so our administration made a couple hiring tweaks, and it has resulted in us going from 23 women in leadership to 34. So that's about 47% of our managers at FSA are women now. And so I think that's just something I'm intentional about is, looking at deficiencies and trying to point out where's the system set up where it's just not working for different groups of people. And that was an easy win. We have some fabulous women who are in management roles now. There's advancement opportunity within the agency in a little bit easier way than having to move to Roseau, which we love our staff in Roseau and we love the community in Roseau. But, I think that's something that we're working on. And then on our leadership team, which is like 13 folks kind of at the top of the agency, we have 5 women in leadership out of 15. And so, we're always trying to get to kind of that equity of 50% or a balance. And it's something we're still working on. I also just want to note that we have a very long way to go to make sure our workforce is reflective of the diversity of our state when it comes to hiring people of color, specifically women of color. And so we're making efforts on that too.
Very cool. You talk about leadership. If I'm not mistaken, you were in MARL, the Minnesota Agriculture and Rural Leadership Program. What's that meant for you in leadership development and really growing at your own personal network?
Yes. Well, so MARL came at a really great time for me because you get moving in your career and you're so busy and you want to do all this stuff, but you don't really take time to reflect on what are my strengths? What is my leadership style? How can I be effective in a conversation or in an organization? And while I had lots of schooling, I feel like I have a lot of good background educationally on agricultural content. I was missing that leadership, management, some of those more soft skills. And MARL was an opportunity to really take 2 years and kind of focus on that. So that was really, really beneficial for me. Additionally, as you mentioned, the network, It's really fun. Every meeting I go to, I see some of my own Marl classmates, but I believe there's like 350 alumni of Marl now, and so it would be hard to go into any room in Minnesota agriculture without running into some sort of Marl alumni. And I've really gotten to learn from, my own classmates, but also other alums along the way. And it's just a really good touch point. We've all kind of gone through a similar experience, and it's a good connection to be able to talk about how we can lead in this space.
I was on that organizing committee that created Marl years ago, so it's fun just to see how this has grown. It's really cool. It's tremendous because you see people in leadership roles really throughout the state, whether county commissioner or FSA director,
Congressman.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Very cool. Any advice you would give to women in this business of agriculture?
Well, I don't know. I'm not one necessarily for so much advice, but I think, a couple things. So first, I would say bring yourself to your work. I feel like, the term authentic leadership is thrown around a lot, but, there's not value in having a diverse group of people or a diverse workforce working on something if you're going to try to emulate, kind of somebody else in the room. And I think about that a lot, having served in positions that, historically have not, kind of been men. And specifically this one, I am following Joe Martin, who, did a great job at FSA, and I get to see the outcomes of his work on a daily basis. But I think if I were to come in and try to manage like Joe and try to make decisions like Joe and try to communicate like Joe, first of all, it would be really exhausting. And second of all, that's not why I'm here. I'm Whitney, and, this is the way that I'm going to have conversations and how I'm going to do things. And so I think that's been tough for women, particularly those who are, the only woman in a room or who are trying to get to a certain position. They try to emulate other people or men or people who have come before them, and that's not the point. Like, the point is we want your perspective and your lived experiences in the position. I say this, I am still working on a lot of these things. The other thing I would say is just to lift up other women. It can be hard. It can be hard to be women in this sector and in this industry. And so, I am grateful for my team of folks that I can turn to, I can ask questions of, I can, complain or rant to when I need to. But I think that, building that community is really important, and building out a team of advocates for yourself is really important. And there are people so willing to do that, to be your mentor, to be your cheerleader. And so lift up other women and seek out those people who can support you.
Awesome. This has been so much fun for me, Whitney. I appreciate you sitting down with me.
Thank you so much, Don. And thanks for highlighting women in ag.
You bet. Again, Whitney Place, the Minnesota State FSA Executive Director. Great pleasure. Our thanks to all of our supporters for making this series Agriculture possible during this month of March. I'm Don Wick on the Red River Farm Network.